This is Renata Nicole of If It's Magic, where if it's magic, we want to write and talk about if it's magic. So go ahead and light your candles, light your incense, and sip on your special herbal tea blend. And if you feel so inclined, go ahead and set a spell while we get right about it. Hi, this is Renata Nicole of If It's Magic. Today is June the 19th of 2021. In this discourse, I will be kicking off my series on the 7 classical planets. Since so much of what we do today stems from what took place in ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon, I believe it would serve as a good foundation for us to start there so we can better understand the symbolism surrounding us in our world today. And in this segment, I chose to discuss the moon first. I'm going to also go back to the age of the pyramids, also known as the Old Kingdom, which puts us to around 2700 BC to 2200 BC. And I'll be discussing deities from the historical religion practiced in Kemet, the area now known as modern-day Egypt. Even though it can be argued that these deities have origins predating this time, I selected this time marker because there's evidence that the goddess Ma'at, which is included in the pantheon, can be dated back to the Old Kingdom in Egypt by researchers. Anyone who has studied ancient Egyptian deities already knows there were a plethora of them. However, I decided to focus on 3 lunar deities for this discussion. I will not be able to discuss all the attributes of these deities, for they vary as much as the attributes of the moon, which is linked to, varies. I would even venture to say that even if we had an eternity, it's not possible for one person to share all of the attributes of any energy, because even when you try to see something from someone else's point of view, we know in part and see in part, which limits our sight to our own perspective. However, with that said, let's get started. The deity I will be discussing is Khonsu. Khonsu's name means traveler. His name alone gives us one of the significations of the moon. The moon is seen as a traveler. It's the fastest celestial body of the 7 classical planets. And to give you an idea of its speed, it would take the moon about 28 days to return to where it's positioned at today. That's opposed to slower moving outer planet Saturn, which takes almost 30 years. Additionally, when it comes to the word traveler, as we sleep by the moon's light, we are said to travel to different realms, as in astral travel. Khonsu is also said to rule the month, and as many of you already know, the word month stems from the word moon, and it's from the moon that we get the ability to calculate the calendar. By tracking the moon, people were able to have an understanding of time, and as a ruler of the month, Khonsu was associated with time. Realize that while in many Western countries we use the Gregorian calendar, which is based off of solar movements of a 365-day cycle, there are still countries in the world that use the lunar calendar, and also many spiritual holidays such as Easter are based off of the lunation cycle as well. Khonsu's association with the month leads into another one of his associations, which is fertility. It is said that he gave assistance to help livestock to grow healthy, as well as plants and flowers. And he was believed to watch over people by night, speaking of the moon's ability to be nourishing as well as nurturing. Remember, the same way the moon has a 28-day cycle is the way that a woman's menstrual cycle is said to be about 28 days, both of which are linked to fertility. And when it comes to helping things to grow, babies grow in a woman's womb, and then the mother nourishes the baby, providing it food, which is often breast milk. So the woman is able to provide nourishment from her body to the child. According to Judica Illis, people would petition Khonsu for fertility, and he was also believed to be able to provide safe childbirth. He was a master healer and had dominion over time, giving some control over the length of the human lifespan. Additionally, there is mythology speaking to him, healing both Horus and Set, making things fair. The moon is linked to the subconscious mind, and healing the mind is said to allow one to heal the entire body. Additionally, Khonsu would transform from being a youth to aging, much like the moon changes phases from the new moon, waxing moon, full moon, and then to the waning moon. In earlier references, Khonsu was seen as an angry deity, and later his attributes became more gentle. This is akin to how in ancient times, the nighttime was seen as an evil time, as people had to figure out how to stay warm at night, as well as safe from animals that were surrounding them. And yet, over time, people started seeing the benefits of the moon. Now, let's discuss our second deity, Seshet. Seshet name means she who scribes. Seshet is credited with the invention of letters and is known as the Lady of Letters. In ancient times, to be a scribe was a high position, and a person holding that position would have had a prominent place in the royal court. Understand, magic was actively utilized in ancient Egypt. When it comes to magic, the ability to scribe is highly important. According to Dr. Luc Delvaux, curator of Egyptian antiques from the Royal Museum of Art and History in Brussels, for ancient Egyptians, images were what brought a monument to life. And the images had to be accompanied by text, or it would be deemed inactive. This is part of the reason why in magic we write out our petitions. By writing, you are bringing something from the subconscious mind and making an impression of it in this realm. In addition to being a scribe, she was also a keeper of records, keeping the records of the names of the dead souls. She ruled over libraries. The moon is linked to memory and the subconscious mind. When things in our lives make an impression upon us, they are impressed or inscribed into our mental memory banks. This inscription allows us to store things. For those of you who have spent time around esoteric circles, I am sure you have heard of the Akashic records. It is hard for many people to grasp the concept of the Akashic records, and so several teachers have described it as a type of massive library, storing all of the collective information that has ever transpired. The moon is also associated with ancestry, just like Seshat is associated with the dead souls. Seshat is said to have invented astronomy. Astronomy is the world's first science. And with there being a time when astronomy and astrology were one, this would mean she would have invented both. Every ancient civilization that has been researched has been found to have studied the sun, the moon, and all the stars. Additionally, Seshet has been credited with inventing mathematics and was said to count up the years of the pharaoh and to be a census keeper. As discussed through Khonsu, the moon helps us track time. Another thing that Seshet was credited with was the invention of surveying, construction, and architecture. When it comes to architecture, Seshet was said to build your mansion and open the door to heaven, and was referenced as the mistress of the house of architecture. In mythology, Seshet conducted what is known as the stretching of the cord ceremony. Buildings were built to be astronomically correct, and Seshet was invoked at the beginning of the ceremony. The ceremony was done to make sure the axis of the temple was properly aligned. This ceremony was important because in ancient Egypt, the orientation of buildings mattered. The belief of the time was that the pharaoh received his power from the northern stars. They referred to the northern stars as the imperishable ones. And after Pharaoh died, the soul of the Pharaoh went to the mooring post in the north via the Milky Way. So in the ceremony, known as the stretching of the cord ceremony, the Pharaoh would be able to properly determine the direction of the north. And it was said that Seshet assisted with this measurement. And this tradition extended from the first dynasty all the way to the Ptolemaic dynasty. For example, the Macedonian Alexander the Great utilized the stretching of the cord ceremony to orient buildings under his rule as well. According to the pyramid text, some of the words that were spoken at the time of this ceremony were as such: I have grasped the stake. I take the measuring cord in the company of Seshet. I consider the progressive movements of the stars. My eye is fixed upon the bull's thigh. I count off time and establish the corners of the temples. I hold the peg. I grasp the handle of the club and grip the measuring cord with Seshet. I turn my eyes to the movement of the stars. I send forth my gaze to the bull's thigh. I count off time. I watch the clock. I establish the four corners of your temple. In this text, when they are using the word bull's thigh, they are referring to the Great Bear, also known as the constellation Ursa Major, where the North Star is located, helping them to orient things to the north, and they did this by the moon's light with the help of Seshet. The method that Pharaoh determined north from whence came his power and to where his soul traveled, it occurred in three distinct phases. 1, he would mark the four corners of the building at night using the stars. 2, he would stretch the cord, driving stakes into the four corners and tying the cord to link them. And then 3, he would loosen the cord so that it slipped down the stakes and lay on the ground, marking the limits of the building. As I previously stated, it was by the night stars and the light of the moon that he was able to measure out the dimensions of the building, properly correlating it to the imperishable ones known as the northern stars. One of the associations with the moon is the house, and the moon is associated with mothers, and mothers have wombs where babies grow. Interestingly enough, the body is said to be a house or a temple. In addition to having invented writing as well as mathematics and astronomy and architecture, among many other things, Seshet was also shown wearing a leopard skin dress. It was believed that when you wore the skin of a thing that you had killed, that you could obtain its power and attributes. With that in mind, know that leopards are very powerful cats who hunt by night. Also, the leopard has rosette spots throughout its fur, which is said to symbolize the patterns of the stars in the sky. In some research, you'll find where it says that she wasn't wearing leopard skin, she was wearing cheetah skin. Even if it's cheetah skin, cat animals are very highly linked to the moon, and cheetahs are the smallest and the fastest of the big cats, and the moon is the smallest and the fastest of the 7 classical planets. This brings us to the final deity that I'm going to discuss in this segment, which is Tehuti. Tehuti's name means he who is like the ibis, and he is actually often depicted with the head of an ibis. The ibis has a beak that curves like a crescent moon, speaking to its connection to the moon. And Tehuti is Seshet's counterpart, and they have overlapping significations. Many of you who are familiar with these deities, you'll know that a lot of the things that I said are associated with Seshet are actually also associated with Tehuti. Earlier in tradition, when Seshet was more heavily venerated, it was said where she invented writing, Tehuti was the one who taught it. And where Tehuti counted, she was the one who would double check behind him for accuracy. However, as time went on, a lot of those significations of Seshet were laid solely upon Tehuti, leaving mainly the straightening of the cord ceremony in her honor. Later Egyptians credited him as the author of all works of wisdom, science, religion, philosophy, and magic, removing any credit of invention from Seshet. With that said, let's take time out to talk more about the ibis symbol. Tehuti's link to the ibis and writing is thought by some to be found when the ibis dips its beak into water, because it's at that time the bird looks a lot like an ink pen being dipped into a pool of ink to be later used by a writer. And among many other things, Tehuti is the god of wisdom, writing, and hieroglyphics. The word hieroglyphics means sacred carvings. Hieroglyphics appear to be images or symbols in the language of the subconscious mind, which is associated with the moon, is symbols. As a lunar deity and the god of wisdom, like Seshet, he possessed all wisdom. One of Tehuti's symbols is that of the baboon. Baboons are highly intelligent creatures. Also, baboons climb to higher ground, such as the tops of cliffs and trees at night, bringing them closer to the heavens at nightfall when the moon has all of her glory, and it is said that we receive knowledge from on high. Tehuti is a primeval deity, with one myth declaring that he created himself by speaking out his own name. In many myths, the moon is said to either be the creator or to have been present at the time of creation. With the moon being linked to the subconscious mind, it's said to be a place of creation, and that as we speak, we create vibratory tones, allowing us to call things forth into this reality. Furthermore, like Khonsu, Tehuti is associated with gambling. As a matter of fact, he is said to play the Egyptian board game Seshat with Khonsu. Seshat is a board game that is still played today. As a matter of fact, you can check out YouTube videos on it. You can order a set online, or you can create a set yourself. It is a game that was played in ancient times, and Judica Ellis talks about how you can still petition the deities and play this game with them. And what would happen is that you would be able to put down and say what you are willing to give away if you lose, and then you lay down the wager of what you want from the deity if you win. And then you would get involved into a game of Seshat with these deities, and it is said that both Khonsu and Thoth enjoy this game. Remember, the moon in its new phase is very childlike, and so playing games is something children like to do. When you're trying to tap into the subconscious, you have to come back to it with the mind of a child in order to be able to create and to manifest. I also want to speak to the fact that during the Ptolemaic period of Egypt, the Greeks blended their culture with the Egyptians, and when they learned of Tehuti, they referred to the deity as Thoth, or you might hear Thoth or Thoth. With all of these, you're going to hear these things pronounced differently. I don't speak ancient Egyptian, just like Seshet or Seshat or Seshet. You're going to hear these pronounced different. And my apologies for any mispronunciation. As I was previously saying, so the name Tehuti later became Thoth. And they compared Tehuti to their deity Hermes, who has similar attributes. And this is important because whereas Tehuti is a lunar deity, Hermes is associated with Mercury. Now, in modern times, we tend to give attributes such as writing, travel, accounting, and playing games to Mercury, often forgetting the ancient historical association to the moon. Symbolism is neat in that way. It can shift over time from culture to culture, and yet its meaning can still ring true. For example, I was taught a long time ago that the left eye is associated with the moon and the right eye is the sun. But in other cultures, it's said to be the reverse, or depend on whether the person was a man or a woman. All of those things hold true because symbols come in 3 levels. There's personal experiences, which only you can connect with based off of your life experiences. Then there are cultural or national experiences that reflect the area that you grew up in or your heritage. And then there are universal symbols where no matter where you go, you're going to find the symbolism to hold true and be the same. As previously stated, for the sake of time, I have left out a great list of attributes associated with Tehuti, Seshet, and Khonsu, as well as the moon. However, I hope this video served as a good starting point and explained some of the symbolism of the moon, offering a better understanding of esoteric language and the magic surrounding us. I will definitely be following up with more videos on this topic concerning the 7 classical planets and the moon, as well as other topics. So in the meantime, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, and you already know it. I'm out.